Imagine waking up one quiet morning to find a letter in your mailbox that feels less like a notice and more like a declaration of war. That's exactly what happened to me. The envelope bore the seal of the Homeowners Association, but inside was something far worse than I expected. An order to remove my father's old sailboat from my dock within 30 days or face crippling fines. They claimed it violated vague aesthetic standards. I stood there on my deck at Willow Lake Estates, coffee in hand, staring out at the calm water where my father's boat rested. That boat wasn't just a vessel. It was the last living connection to my dad, who had taught me how to sail when I was just a boy. It had been 5 years since he passed, but I could still hear his steady voice guiding me through the wind and waves. To me, that boat wasn't an eyesore. It was family, and I wasn't going to give it up easily. Willow Lake Estates looked perfect on the surface. 75 homes built in a wide horseshoe around a shimmering lake, with about 24 docks belonging to individual homeowners. The rest of the neighborhood used the community marina, which was supposed to be the crown jewel of the HOA. Most of my neighbors were decent people, the kind who waved when you walked by or offered help carrying groceries. Tom Reynolds, a retired Navy officer, lived 2 doors down and was sharp as ever. Sarah Bennett, a real estate lawyer, was my next-door neighbor and always seemed to be the voice of reason. But 6 months earlier, everything changed when Claire Donovan became president of the HOA. She had campaigned on raising property values and modernizing the community. At first, that sounded harmless. But once she took office, her improvements meant harassment for anyone who didn't fit her picture-perfect vision. My boat was her latest excuse. What made me furious was that my boat wasn't the worst looking on the lake. A speedboat down the street had peeling paint, and a couple of houses over sat a pontoon that looked abandoned. None of those owners had received notices, just me. That evening was the monthly HOA meeting, and I went determined to get answers. The community center buzzed with chatter as neighbors filled the chairs. Claire sat at the front with her vice president, Victor Hayes, both dressed as if they were hosting a corporate gala instead of a neighborhood meeting. Her silver blonde hair was pulled tight in a bun, her diamond bracelet catching the fluorescent light with every smug gesture. When my turn came to speak, I stood up calmly and asked a simple question. Where exactly in our bylaws does it say my boat is a violation? Claire gave me a smile colder than ice. Your boat is dated, Mr. Carter. It doesn't fit the upscale image we want for Willow Lake Estates. I raised photographs of other deteriorating boats docked around the neighborhood. Why haven't these been cited then? Victor leaned back in his chair, smirking. The HOA has discretion. Your boat is a relic. It lowers the community's appeal. That's when Tom stood up, his military posture commanding the room. I've lived here since the day this place was built. There has never been a single rule about boat appearances. Ellen Parker, the HOA secretary, nervously flipped through her notes and admitted she couldn't find anything about boat aesthetics in the bylaws. Claire snapped, The board doesn't need to write down every standard to enforce them. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Sarah leaned toward me and whispered something that sent a chill down my spine. Richard, Claire's husband, has been asking neighbors if they'd be willing to sell their properties. They're working with developers. Suddenly, it all made sense. This wasn't about my boat at all. It was about pushing me, and anyone else who resisted, out of the neighborhood so Claire and Richard could line their pockets. That night, I went home burning with anger. I pulled out my property documents, determined to find something, anything, I could use to fight back. That's when I discovered the mistake that would change everything. A survey from years back had mislabeled a piece of land as common area, when in fact it legally belonged to my property. That narrow strip of land included the only path to the community marina, which meant the HOA had been trespassing for years, and without my permission, no one could access their so-called crown jewel. When I showed Sarah the documents the next morning, her reaction said it all. "Ethan," she gasped, "you own the only access point. They've been using your land illegally. You could shut them out completely." The idea was risky, but Claire had already declared war. If she wanted to take away my father's legacy, I'd take away the very thing she needed most. The morning of the fence installation arrived with the sound of a heavy truck rattling down our street. By sunrise, workers were unloading cedar posts, cement, and panels right across the narrow strip of land that led to the marina. Within minutes, augers were chewing into the ground, hammers rang out, and neighbors wandered over in bathrobes, coffee mugs in hand, whispering as they watched. At 8:15 sharp, Claire's black Mercedes screeched to a halt. She stormed out in heels, her face already red. "What is this madness?" she shrieked, pointing at the workers. I handed her the survey documents. "This land is mine. The HOA's been trespassing for years. I'm finally putting a stop to it." She looked down at the papers, her hands shaking. "You're really doing this over that old boat?" I shook my head. "No, Claire, this is about my rights." She called the police in a fury, but when the officer reviewed my documents, he turned to her calmly. "This is his property. It's a civil matter. There's nothing we can do." Watching the color drain from her face as laughter rippled through the gathered crowd was almost satisfying enough, but not quite. By noon, half the fence was already up. By late afternoon, a 6-foot barrier sealed off the marina, topped with a sturdy gate and a padlock that only I controlled. Claire tried diplomacy, offering to work something out, but I told her plainly the only deal would be on my terms, with the HOA acknowledging my rights and ending the harassment. The next day was supposed to be her big moment, a glittering fundraiser at the marina to boost Richard's political career. Instead, her guests arrived to find a wall blocking the path. Claire spent the morning making desperate phone calls, but she had no leverage left. That evening, while she tried to salvage her event on the other side of the fence, I hosted a meeting in my backyard. Dozens of neighbors gathered as I laid out the truth. The false violation notices, the survey error that gave me control of the marina access, and finally the real bombshell. Evidence that Claire and Richard had been working with developers to slowly force homeowners out and turn Willow Lake into a luxury resort. Gasps spread through the crowd as Sarah explained the legal violations, and Ellen revealed that thousands of dollars in HOA funds had been spent without approval. Even Victor, the vice president, cracked under pressure and admitted Richard had promised him future real estate deals. By the time Tom stood up and called for a vote of no confidence, the result was overwhelming. Claire and Richard were out. An interim board was elected on the spot, led by Tom and Sarah, and the very first order of business was rescinding every baseless violation notice. Over the next few weeks, an audit uncovered tens of thousands of dollars misused by Claire's leadership. Facing lawsuits and disgrace, she and Richard sold their house and left Willow Lake in defeat. The community began to heal. Barbecues and concerts returned to the marina. Neighbors trusted one another again, and the HOA became transparent and fair. As for me, I restored my father's sailboat to its original glory. On weekends, I taught neighborhood kids to sail, passing on the lessons my father once gave me. The fence still stands across the marina path, but now the gate stays open. Not because I have to, but because I choose to. One warm evening, I sat on the drifter as the sun dipped low and the lake shimmered gold. It hit me that my fight hadn't just saved a boat. It had saved an entire neighborhood from greed. Bullies like Claire thrive on intimidation, but with courage, persistence, and a little bit of stubbornness, they can be brought down. My father would have been proud.